The Canadian government is bracing itself for a significant economic confrontation with the United States, as it prepares a series of retaliatory measures in response to potential tariffs threatened by President-elect Donald J. Trump. This political and economic tension stems from the fact that Canada and the U.S. are each other's largest trading partners, making any disruption in trade particularly impactful for both nations. In anticipation of Trump's threats to impose a sweeping 25% tariff on Canadian goods, the Canadian government is compiling a detailed list of countermeasures. These measures may include implementing tariffs on U.S. exports to Canada, as well as levies or restrictions on key Canadian exports to the United States. Such actions would not only aim to protect Canadian interests, but also send a clear message regarding the seriousness of their response to any aggressive trade policies initiated by Trump. However, Canadian officials have emphasized a cautious approach, stating that they will closely monitor the decisions made by the incoming administration before finalizing their response. This strategy reflects a desire to remain diplomatic, while also ensuring that Canada is prepared to defend its economic interests if necessary. The prospect of a trade war raises significant questions about the economic ramifications for both countries. Given the interconnected nature of the Canadian and American economies, any tariffs imposed could disrupt supply chains, increase costs for consumers, and potentially lead to job losses on both sides of the border. Trade between Canada and the U.S. has historically been characterized by a high volume of goods and services exchanged. In 2020, for instance, two-way trade between the countries exceeded $700 billion, underscoring the deep economic ties that exist. A trade dispute could thus have ripple effects, not just within the two countries but also impacting global markets and trade relationships. Moreover, the potential for retaliatory tariffs raises critical issues regarding the effectiveness of such measures. While Canada seeks to protect its industries and workers from the impact of U.S. tariffs, retaliatory actions can escalate tensions and lead to a tit-for-tat exchange that may ultimately harm both economies. Such dynamics can create uncertainty for businesses and investors, affecting long-term economic planning and growth. In this context, the Canadian government's strategy will likely involve a careful balancing act. It must demonstrate strength and resolve in protecting its trade interests, while also striving to maintain a cooperative relationship with the U.S. This approach may involve engaging in diplomatic discussions, seeking to negotiate terms that could prevent a full-blown trade war. Additionally, the Canadian government could leverage its relationships with other trading partners to bolster its position. By strengthening ties with nations that share similar trade concerns regarding the U.S., Canada may amplify its voice on the global stage and work towards creating a united front against unilateral trade actions. The economic relationship between Canada and the United States is one of the most significant bilateral trading partnerships in the world. Both nations are each other's largest trading partners, with trillions of dollars in goods and services exchanged annually. This interdependence creates a complex dynamic, particularly when political tensions arise. With the ascension of Donald Trump to the presidency, the prospect of tariffs on Canadian goods has stirred considerable concern within the Canadian government and among Canadian businesses. As President-elect Trump prepared to take office, he made it clear that he intended to prioritize American economic interests, even if it meant imposing tariffs on foreign imports. His administration's potential plan to levy a 25% tariff on Canadian goods could have severe repercussions, not only for Canada's economy but also for the U.S. economy, which relies on Canadian exports. In anticipation of these tariffs, the Canadian government began assembling a list of retaliatory measures aimed at U.S. exports to Canada. This list included potential tariffs and levies on American goods, as well as restrictions on key Canadian exports to the United States. The government sought to send a clear message. If the U.S. pursued aggressive trade policies, Canada would not hesitate to respond in kind. 1. Economic implications of retaliation. The economic implications of such retaliatory measures are profound. Tariffs on U.S. goods could lead to increased prices for Canadian consumers and businesses reliant on American products. However, the Canadian government views this as a necessary stance to protect its economic interests and to maintain a fair trading environment. By targeting U.S. exports, Canada aims to inflict economic pain that matches any potential tariffs imposed by the U.S. 2. Areas of focus for Canadian retaliation. Canadian officials have indicated that their list of retaliatory measures will focus on key sectors where U.S. exports are prominent. This could include agricultural products, manufacturing, and even technology sectors. Targeting specific industries would not only maximize the impact of the retaliation, but also demonstrate to American lawmakers the interconnectedness of the two economies. Despite these preparations, the Canadian government has emphasized that it will wait to see the specific actions taken by the Trump administration before implementing any retaliatory measures. This cautious approach reflects a broader strategy of careful diplomacy and negotiation. Canada understands the importance of maintaining a constructive dialogue with the U.S., while simultaneously preparing for potential confrontations. 1. The role of diplomacy. Canada's leadership has historically valued diplomacy as a means of resolving trade disputes. By waiting to see how Trump's administration moves forward, Canadian officials aim to open channels for discussion, hoping to avoid an all-out trade war. This method underscores Canada's preference for negotiation over confrontation, aiming to achieve a resolution that could prevent economic harm to both nations. 2. Monitoring developments. Canadian officials are closely monitoring developments in the U.S. political landscape, particularly regarding trade policies. This vigilance will allow Canada to adapt its strategies in real time as the situation evolves. Should tariffs be implemented, Canada will be prepared to respond swiftly and decisively. The potential for tariffs and retaliatory measures is unfolding against the backdrop of long-standing economic ties and mutual dependency. The two countries engage in extensive trade in various sectors, including energy, agriculture, and technology. Disruptions in this relationship could have far-reaching consequences. 1. Historical trade relations. Historically, Canada and the U.S. have navigated complex trade relationships through agreements like NAFTA, now USMCA. These agreements have played a crucial role in shaping trade policies and facilitating economic cooperation. The looming threat of tariffs jeopardizes this framework, raising concerns about the future of trade relations. 2. Political ramifications. The political ramifications of a trade conflict extend beyond economics. Trade disputes can become focal points in national politics, influencing public sentiment and electoral outcomes. Canadian leaders must balance the need to protect economic interests with the potential backlash from voters who may be affected by rising prices and economic uncertainty. As Canada prepares for the possibility of tariffs from the incoming Trump administration, it stands at a crossroads. The decisions made in the coming weeks will not only shape the immediate economic landscape, but will also set the tone for future U.S.-Canada relations. The Canadian government's careful approach underscores its commitment to protecting national interests while striving for a diplomatic resolution that benefits both nations.